even at midday, and when they ran back afraid to their walls, on the tree trunks they had passed not 5 minutes before, the bark would be stripped and chiselled with the stroke of some great taloned paw. The more they kept to their village, the bolder grew the wild things that gambolled and bellowed on the grazing grounds by the Waingunga. They had no time to patch and plaster the rear walls of the empty byres that backed on to the jungle. The wild pig trampled them down, and the knotty rooted vines hurried after and threw their elbows over the new won ground, and the coarse grass bristled behind the vines like the lances of a goblin army following a retreat. The unmarried man ran away first, and carried the news far and near that the village was doomed. Who could fight, they said, against the Jungle, or the gods of the Jungle, when the very village cobra had left his hole in the platform under the peepul tree? So their little commerce with the outside world shrunk as the trodden paths across the open grew fewer and fainter. At last the nightly trumpetings of Hathi and his 3 sons ceased to trouble them, for they had no more to be robbed of. The crop on the ground and the seed in the ground had been taken, the outlying fields were already losing their shape, and it was time to throw themselves on the charity of the English at Khanhiwara. Native fashion, they delayed their departure from one day to another, till the first rains caught them and the unmended roofs let in a flood, and the grazing ground stood ankle deep, and all life came on with a rush after the heat of summer. Then they waded out, man, women and children, through the blinding hot rain of the morning, but turned naturally for one farewell look at their homes. They heard, as the last burdened family filed through the gate, a crash of falling beams and thatch behind the walls. They saw a shiny, snaky black trunk lifted for an instant, scattering sodden thatch. It disappeared, and there was another crash, followed by a squeal. Hathi had been plucking off the roofs of the huts as you pluck water lilies, and a rebounding beam had pricked him. He needed only this to unchain his full strength, for of all things in the jungle, the wild elephant, enraged, is the most wantonly destructive. He kicked backward at a mud wall that crumbled at the stroke, and, crumbling, melted to yellow mud under the torrent of rain. Then he wheeled and squealed and tore through the narrow streets, leaning against the huts right and left, shivering the crazy doors and crumpling up the caves, while his 3 sons raged behind him as they had raged at the sack of the fields of Bhurtpore. "The Jungle will swallow these shells," said a quiet voice in the wreckage. "It is the outer wall that must lie down." And Mowgli, with the rain sluicing over his bare shoulders and arms, leaped back from a wall that was settling like a tired buffalo. "All in good time," panted Hathi. "Oh, but my tusks were red at Bhurtpore. To the outer wall, children, with a head, together, now!" The 4 pushed side by side, the outer wall bulged, split, and fell, and the villagers, dumb with horror, saw the savage clay-streaked heads of the wreckers in the ragged gap. Then they fled, houseless and foodless, down the valley, as their village, shredded and tossed and trampled, melted behind them. A month later the place was a dimpled mound, covered with soft, green, young stuff, and by the end of the rains there was the roaring jungle in full blast on the spot that had been under plough not 6 months before. End of Section 9.